T, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
I'm on Facebook making sure it's going live.
Is it live yet?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, welcome everyone to another Spill the Tea. And today our guest is Heather Heynen.
Hey.
Um, she is a licensed professional counselor. She's been at this business now for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
She's 47, a mother of one child. She loves travel, adventure, and she has passion for whatever life has to offer. Um, Today's focus is going to be on dealing with the obstacles to that we find in better health, in particular for T and I, the low carb lifestyle and the obstacles to that, which tend to fall actually into the psychosocial aspects of food and how it relates to our lives, in particular food cravings extending out into eating disorders. And in this area, Heather has a tremendous 20 years worth of experience. And on top of that, I want to read this because it's super important for our listeners to understand. She is a recovered binge eater, overeater, overexerciser, restrictor, emotional eater, and she has been through. So she has not only experience helping people, but she has been through these
Absolutely.
Transitions. So good morning, Heather, and
Morning.
let me bring Sam in.
Okay.
All right. So off the top of my head, what would be some strategies for those of us that are in the leadership roles here, the health coaches that are trying to help our clients overcome these kind of issues? I'm just going to let you roll with this. What do you think we should be doing? Because we are health coaches, and most of us are not certified like you, right? We don't have any experience counseling,
Right.
and we're not, and also we're not. So that means we're not qualified in this, but truthfully, we end up in this challenge all the time.
Yep, absolutely. So, first thing I would say is, what kind of piggybacking on what you just said, is that, if there is an extreme disordered eating pattern, it's something that maybe you and the client have been working on. There's not a lot of change taking place, obviously. And this is even as a therapist. If I feel I have a client that, I'm not helping or that sort of thing, referring out is a great idea. Finding an expert in that field. With that said, what you just talked about is also true. Often those clients are coming to us, and whether we have that therapy background or not, you are the helper in that situation. And so besides referring out, there are some, I would say, general things you can do when you're working with someone one-on-one for those issues. And those are things like really working on creating that trustworthy relationship. So we know in therapy, there's tons of theories that you can follow as a therapist as kind of your framework for working with clients. But the truth is, what the research tells us, it really doesn't matter what theory you're using. It's more about that relationship with the client. If you can create a healthy, trustworthy relationship with the client, you can often invoke behavioral change simply from that. So, and there, there's ways, probably as a health coach, you're a helper anyway, not you, but a health coach in general is a helper anyway. So it's probably pretty good at creating some of those relationship patterns that help create the change. So that would be the first thing. Just really understanding your relationship with that client is going to be what helps the most. And then another thought as I'm talking that I had is probably, I don't know if you've had this, but I've talked to some other coaches, therapists, and a lot of times the obstacle we come up into is having enough patience for our clients to make those changes. Understanding that your worthiness, your sense as a health coach does not depend on whether your client makes those changes or not. So a lot of patience, a lot of not taking things personal when changes aren't made right away. And just having that understanding so that you're not constantly feeling like you're not making that change, and you end up feeling frustrated as a coach, because I really believe our clients can sense that. So yeah, that importance of patients. And then maybe too, if you've listened to some of my stuff, I get into really trying to understand that individual, and that each individual is going to be different and unique. And so our strategies, how we engage with that person to create that relationship and try to create that behavior change with them is going to be different. So these can be things like, you might have a client who you start to learn really needs a lot of encouragement, right? And then you also might have a client where you start to learn they actually do well with a little bit more direct intervention.
Right.
Like, here are the things I want you to do. Right.
Yeah.
Does that answer some of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you talked about a little bit about the theories. And here's the thing, I've off and on, I've been doing a lot of homework in this area because
Right.
I've encountered some clients that, as we were speaking about earlier, that are heavy into the eating disorder end of this continuum.
Right.
And I felt like that I needed to come up with some strategies. So I started reading the literature and whatnot myself, and trying to sort out, if there was any sort of coherence in any of this. And what I found was, and I shouldn't have been surprised really, like when you look at the medical literature in regard to ketogenic diets as an example, there's not really, well, there is sort of a coherence, a negative one, but it's all over the place. And just to give you an example, I don't know if you've read her or not. Catherine Hansen is one approach where she's advocating for teaching your clients to dismiss the urge and then making sure they're getting adequate food, right?
Right. Yeah.
So to me, that's like one side of a line.
Right.
And then on the other, and this has mainly been through YouTube, I've been listening. In fact, this morning before I got on with you, I was listening to what I consider to be the other side of the line, which is somebody talking about emotional eating and trying to dig into what happened in their childhood and all this. And I listened to that.
Yeah.
And I've read Catherine's stuff. Right.
Yep. I know that one. Yeah.
And I'm going, all right, the truth has got to be somewhere
right
between the two, right? Because I know that when I got into the low carb, the ketogenic lifestyle was because I was pre-diabetic.
Right.
And I had to deal with some of my own cravings, right? Yeah. So every night before I'd go to bed, and this was stuff I hadn't really thought about, right?
Yeah, a little bit subconscious, unconscious behavior patterns, right? Yeah.
So every night prior to getting into this lifestyle, I was doing the big fatty dark. They were called dark chocolate. Mm-hmm. That was my excuse, really, right? And this bar was loaded with sugar.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it wasn't like going to Trader Joe's and buying an 85%, any of that. No, I was looking for the big fatty Hershey with
yeah.
And then I was, and I was still drinking 3 beers every single night while I was making dinner.
Yep.
And I had to deal with those food cravings.
You bet.
Now, for me, it wasn't that big a deal. And T's pointed this out, right? T, you can jump in anytime. She's pointed this out. Well, Dad, you made this transition. Mm-hmm. You just decided to do it and then you did it.
Yes, because you're a highly disciplined person. I know that about you. Yeah. Not everybody is, though. That's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I started health coaching, and so far what I've noticed when you first start working with someone is you go through all of the intake and everything like that. And you think, well, now I know enough to know within about 3 or 4 days, you're going to start getting the ambushes.
Yep. The self-sabotage. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's the pizza, especially the social gatherings and things like that. Both the extended family, where you sit down with a meal and the grandparents are there, the blended family, the spouses, all that business is here. And now you've got somebody who's sitting in that group
Yeah.
who needs to modulate what they're eating, and it just goes out the window.
Yeah. Right. So, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no.
Well, I was just going to say, so, what I'm thinking about right now as you're talking is, and if you, if you've listened or read some of the stuff I put out there, you're going to be like, yes, Heather, I've heard this before, but it really is such a huge component of helping clients change behavior and comply. And that is what I call the thought work around everything. And so, I think we often, as you talk about, you're a highly disciplined person, to be honest, I am a very type A, structured sort of thing. A lot of times implementing behavior change doesn't turn into this super, super difficult, deep-seated emotional issue, right? It's like you said, you were able to work through changing that chocolate habit, that 3 beer a night habit. But like you said, for some people, the thought process, our thoughts create our feelings, which motivate our behaviors. So, if you understand how I'm thinking is gonna create this sort of what I call chemical cocktail sensation that runs through my body, that's the feeling. And from the feeling, I am either going to, I'm going to behave in some sort of way. And so if the thought process, when you're sitting, like your example in this family meal, and this client's been doing so well for a few days, but now here they are in this social situation, and they're feeling pressure to eat like everyone else. They're probably having thoughts like, I want to belong, I want to be part of this. I really want the food. I mean, it could be about anything, but that thought then creates a feeling for them of, oh yeah, there's so much anxiety because I'm thinking these things. I'm definitely eating the food. And their behavior then follows. They eat the food. Then what happens is that cycle of shame, guilt that they ate the food, they gave in, they went off plan, whatever it is. And that shame cycle, that guilt, that feeling then really creates, they may be able to restrict for a little while, but because there's such crappy feelings, they're going to eat to resolve that. That's the coping mechanism, right?
Right.
That's what they need to soothe the feeling. So understanding, if I can start doing some thought work on what kind of thoughts can I think in that situation that might level up my feelings in that situation, that might create more feelings of willingness, of compliance, of relief. Because a lot of times if we're feeling relief in a situation, we're not going to eat, we're not going to have that same sort of compulsion to use food to quell the negative emotion. Does that all make sense?
That makes sense. And I think T's got a question to jump in a second, but that's one thing that I found on Clubhouse. I've been, I go around a lot of the rooms. T and I are doing our own show on Saturday mornings.
Cool.
But here's the thing, when I ask the same question in these rooms, tons of these guys will just respond by saying, you just have to say no. Yeah. And I always preface the question that I asked you in those types of groups. I always preface this by, all right, I could say no, and I did say no.
Yeah.
Honestly, though, for the audience, I'm still struggling with my relationship around alcohol, right?
You bet. Same idea.
Yep. Yeah, because I have the Aura Ring now, right? And I'm really looking at sleep patterns, and geez, all I need is one low carb beer.
Throws you
my
off.
Sleep is screwed,
Yeah.
But anyway, not to get off track, all of these coaches and even people in the room you just got to say no. And it makes me worry that the groupings that are going into those sessions are all there because, we all have been successful in the lifestyle, right? So we all have the capabilities to say no, but it's like, what about the guys who can't?
Right. What about the guys and gals who really don't have a super huge interest or passion for health and learning all the things, but just really wanting to get healthy, right?
Right.
I think the same exact way that you're talking about, we come from a certain bias, not we, but every person comes from a certain bias of our experience. And when you kind of figure out a thing that you're so excited about and you want to share it with everyone, it's like you feel like your way of doing it is gonna create behavior change in everybody else. And to your point, it just does not work that way. Each individual is coming with so many different thoughts, feelings, life experiences, traumas in the past, you know, all that kind of stuff. So very individualized. The just saying no might work for a few individuals, but I would say very few. You know, most of us, it takes strategy and skill, and that goes into our thinking patterns and our behavior patterns to make those changes.
T, you've been helping. T's been helping a guy up there in South Dakota informally. His name is Grizz, right?
Yeah, he's my archery coach.
Oh, I love it.
He's really cool. So basically, I met him I do like youth archery here in at the little. It's great. It's like right next to the gun.
That's great. Nice.
But it's like indoor shooting, and I started going to league probably about like 2.5 months ago.
Okay. Yeah.
And, I just like fell in love with archery. Like I just thought it was so fun. And Grizz, he's like an elderly gentleman. He's 77 years old.
Yeah.
Awesome guy. Really took me under his wing, and he's been basically coaching me on competitive shooting.
Very cool. My
points have increased. I think it was like 46 last time. I got 46 more points.
That's awesome. He's a good coach.
He's a really good coach.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing with Grizz is he's actually a type 2 diabetic.
Okay.
And I forget how this even came up. Oh, you know what it was? I told him I was making pizza. And it's like, well, I can't eat pizza because it's really high in sugar and carbohydrates. And I was like, yeah, but I make keto pizza. And I started talking to him about the ketogenic lifestyle and everything like that. So I was like, well, I'm going to give you a book. And I had one of me and Dad's books that had a spelling typo in it, right?
Yeah.
So I gave that to him, and because he doesn't have a computer, he doesn't have a phone. He's like totally one of those people. He started reading.
Mm-hmm.
He fell in love with Dad's story, I think, because he could relate so heavily to Dad, and the fact that, you know, Dad was diagnosed as pre-diabetic, and he basically wanted to figure it out, like have a solution. And Chris is the same way. He wants to figure it out himself and have a solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he just, I mean, it was like this like switch. He comes the next Tuesday, and he's already lowered his blood sugar by like, I think it's the lowest points he's had in. It's like 105 right now, and he's
amazing.
Was used to being in the 250s.
Right. That is amazing.
It's, I mean, amazing. He said that he had a lot of pain in his foot, and that he's not really having pain in his foot anymore. But the cool aspect is once Grizz kind of changed his mentality about the lifestyle and started really taking it seriously, this whole community took it really seriously because he's a really great person. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so they all saw like in the way he's feeling. And now, you know, at the Igloo Bar, which is like coffee shop bar, like food, it has everything. Now like made Grizz his own like breakfast bowl. You know?
That's so cool.
So without the carbs and everything, that really go out and do things and eat and everything. But I think that has to, again, he's a very disciplined individual.
Right.
And there's only, I think it's a rarity to kind of have that, you know, and I see a similarity, I think, with, sorry, my phone was going off. I see a similarity between Dad and Grizz in a lot of like different manners, and the discipline aspect, the adventure. I mean, he was a mountain man for a really long time, lived in the Wind Rivers, actually. It was like some kind of similarities, but for people who don't necessarily have that discipline aspect,
right?
Like, what would you suggest to do as like a starting? Because it's hard to say no. Like, take it from me, like.
For sure.
Is a really hard thing, but what would be a strategy that someone could kind of do to navigate that initial, like that conversation, that difficulty of being in a situation like that?
Okay, hold on. Before you go, Heather, I want to point out in the story that you just told, T, a really crucial thing is his community jumped in to help him, right?
Yeah.
And before we go, to Heather, I just wanted to make sure to point that out because that's a tremendous thing here.
Huge.
Right. Anyway, sorry for the interruption. And Sam, you can jump in anytime after Heather is done with this part. If you want to ask a question, you should feel comfortable just jumping in. All right. Sorry. Go ahead. Go for it, Heather.
No, that's okay. So, you know, when you recognize as a coach, when you recognize, or you're trying to help in whatever manner, you recognize, okay, this person, probably has not had a lifetime of discipline practice, right? I mean, because when you talk about the sports and the archery right away, I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. Like he is disciplined in that, Matt. That's the same thing for us with climbing, all that kind of stuff. You learn that if you've been doing it for a while, your brain kind of automatically works in that way. But you're so right. Most people in general, don't come from that same place. So if you recognize you sort of have a client like that, I guess my thought right now that's coming up, it's like, can you offer them instead things to add in versus things to take away? And so the discipline practice, finding, and when we talk about discipline, what we're really talking about is finding integrity with ourselves. So the idea is with a client like that, you want to first you want to help them build integrity with themselves. You want to help them build that feeling. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, right? And in order to build that, you have to start pretty, I wouldn't say small, but just slow and easier. And so a lot of times, I'll give clients like that real basic things for health to add in. We don't take anything away at first, nothing. So we don't take food away. We don't take their coping mechanism of overeating away. We don't try to change the binging behavior. We simply add in, and these would just be there's tons of things you could do, but an example, they're going to start drinking 8 glasses of water today. Can they commit to that? Right. And if they can, and they can do it for 5 days and they can track that and they can come back to you and say, hey, I did that for 5 days. It's like they've built that integrity with themselves. And then that willingness to try the next step can come on board a little bit. So that's where it takes that patience. And for some of those clients, it just takes some time and reassuring them, those changes, they are going to happen. It's going to take a little bit of time, but we have to build that integrity with yourself first. And that's how you build the discipline, teeny tiny things at a time. Or maybe it's adding in, me, I'm a big protein proponent. So I would say adding in, can we get you to eat protein, even just like 2 ounces at every meal and every snack? You can eat whatever else you want after that, but that's going to be, yes, I think I could do that. Or I could do that 3 out of 7 days. Does that?
So that really helps, because I think you kind of, not only that, it builds that integrity, like from how I'm like perceiving it or understanding it, but you're also, I think, a really, maybe not for the average person, but for the population as a whole, I think it's really hard to commit to something with the fear of failing.
That's exactly, T. That is exactly it.
Like, I think that it's just when you want to try something new, and a lot of people, and I've been reading this a lot on all the forums and everything like that. There's a lot of people that dive into the ketogenic lifestyle. And I'm assuming it's like this for anything that you do. It's not just a ketogenic lifestyle. And they're really starting full force.
Yeah.
And they don't know, it's like they don't know where to start. And so it's like they try, and then they don't get these results that they want to get, because it's like, instead of taking a step, they're taking a hop, skip, and a leap to try and get to achieve these goals. So you're not going to reach the weight loss goals. You're not going to reach the reversing prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, because after a month or not even a month, I think it's like a couple of weeks, people don't feel good. They're not doing the right, the amount of carbs. Like, they're not taking things out of their life that they don't know necessarily how to navigate it. And then when your mentality gets to that point of like, okay, well, this sucks because I'm not reaching these goals I thought I was going to.
Which then creates that vicious cycle of the shame and the guilt, which then leads into self-sabotage, which then leads into completely quitting, which we all know the quitting is what, the quitting is when this is never going to work. But if we can get them to progress in those small little changes, they won't quit, because you can almost get to a place where you kind of enjoy a little bit of the process, and coaching them on that is such a good way too. So I think you're right on. It's that mentality. It is the thought process, which then creates the feelings that are gonna either perpetuate continued small behavior changes, or it's gonna shut you down.
Yeah. And I think that's so crucial, because I feel like for any client, any person, no matter what you do, we all want to feel validated by ourselves and like commit, achieve those goals by ourselves. I think that's just a human nature type of thing, because if you don't feel needed, or you know what I mean, as humans,
do.
in general, if we don't feel that need or that accomplishment, I think that's what causes us to go into patterns of unhealthy lifestyles, because we're trying to somehow fill that, you know what I mean, that I want to
Yeah.
achieve that, but this is what makes me feel good, even though it's not healthy.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I remember I caught one of your podcasts with a gentleman that it sounded like I wasn't able to listen to the whole thing because I got interrupted, but you're working with an individual. I'm betting you're still working with him, and we don't want to violate confidentiality here.
Right.
But what I'm wondering about, and the part that I listened to, it sounded like he had some eating disorder stuff and whatnot. And here's something that I've run into. At what point do you address the spouse?
Oh,
And maybe he's not married. I don't know, but
right.
I'm sure you've had clients where you've got this individual, they really want to make a healthy change in their life, but then you have this other individual, and the other individual may or may not be on board,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
How do you navigate, what kinds of suggestions might you have for the people that are listening to this that are in that situation?
Yeah, where they're trying to make changes, but spouse not totally on board, so they don't have that support system.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the spouse wants to eat different things. You know, if you have a person, I mean, you and I are sort of like, I don't know. I think that you look at a group of people more globally, whereas I'm more focused in on the guys that are type 2. So I always go back to that, but
Sure.
understand what I'm asking you is not, it doesn't have to have that specificity. So I always go to the sugar thing, right? If we've got somebody who's got to bring their fasting glucose down because we're trying to, you know, reverse that whole amazing platform of dysregulation, right?
Yeah.
And the spouse is like, I'm going to make dinner for you tonight, honey, right? And then there's a plate of spaghetti and, you know, with the sugar sauce and then there's the dessert.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah. So what I would say to that is, when do you bring in the spouse? I would say when your client is comfortable with it, first of all. So always up to the client, you know? So if your client is like, I think I need some help here. And then if the spouse is willing, because that's another part of it. So if the spouse is willing, cool, you can bring them in, educate them, you know, kind of let the spouse know these are our goals here. We're really, because when you talk about true health, you know, well, they're all obesity, everything is a health issue, but when you're talking about diabetes in particular, we both know when a person is diabetic and they're eating things that are shooting that blood sugar, I mean, we're talking about some very life and death situations here. So it becomes very poignant then to have that spouse maybe involved or educated on what's going on. But I will just say, beyond that, you're going to get some spouses who, or significant others or group of friends who, I mean, you maybe have seen this, but where that person starts to change, they start changing their behaviors, and socially things start to shift. Because if you have a group of friends who's used to going out and eating this way and drinking this way, and you're really trying to change that, it's going to create some rifts within those relationships, to where I've seen people have to change their social situation in order to be healthy. And, you know, that's a hard thing, but it's kind of the truth. When it comes to a spouse, someone you're living with, there are still ways, even if that spouse is not on board, there are still ways for that client to get through some of those situations. But for me, you know, my experience, that comes back into, you know, figuring out ways for your client to think within those situations, so that the feelings are maybe not flooding them when they're having to reject the plate of spaghetti, or say, oh, I so appreciate you offering to make dinner for me. That is so kind. But remember, I'm kind of doing this thing to get my health back. So I'm going to have a salad with some of the meatballs that you were going to put on the pasta. I mean, there really is some conversations you can have to, you know, where if you can't get that spouse involved, then there are still ways your client can make it through those. But it's tough. Not gonna lie, that's harder. Like you were talking about your client T, who, you know, the community kind of was able to help him out. I mean, it is a huge thing to have people around you supporting you, but if you don't, it's still doable. I guess
Yeah.
And I think in that aspect too with Grizz, him being a type 2 diabetic, he already had like a food list, like something to start with, right? That he was given to him.
Yep.
But with other individuals, like one thing that I've really encountered is, especially with keto,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, you just don't eat bread. And I'm
Right.
well, no, that's not
More than that.
it's,
Right.
it's a little bit more, you know, yes, I do not eat bread, but it's a little bit like, okay, let's go into depth a little bit more.
Right.
If someone's like, okay, well, what can I eat this? And I'm like, well, look at the back, like,
Read the
what
label.
does that have? And yeah, read the label. And just to bring up, I guess we were talking about the sauces or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
so Grizz was aware that pizza sauce has a lot of sugar in it. I mean,
Right.
there's like 30 grams of like per serving, and there's like 3 servings in that can.
Yeah.
And
Such a sneaky one.
yeah, so like exactly. And people don't realize that, but they're like, but there's no, it's just like pasta sauce or pizza sauce. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, but you have to look at the back and see how many grams of carbs are in there. Because if
Exactly.
that'll throw me out of ketosis like that, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So for him, at least, he has the awareness to be like, okay, well, how do you make your sauce? Because sauce is really high in carbohydrates. So what do you do? And like, kind of like that opens the conversation. But I do think that having the support of the community, also your family, is really important. Like one thing that I've really experienced is communicating what the ketogenic lifestyle is and showing people what you can eat off of that is essential. Like, you know, my mom, I'm here in South Dakota right now.
Oh,
I'm,
you are?
I am.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm in out here on like the southern like end of the
Yep.
hills. But with mom, I mean, we're meat and potatoes. I think everyone here can know that in this side of this side of the country, it's meat, potatoes. Like that's
Totally.
just something that we eat.
Mm-hmm.
And me being here, I've been here for almost 2 months, 2.5 months. Mom has really adjusted her cooking like styles so that she's able to kind of work with me. But you know, at first it was like, is this keto? Is this keto?
Right.
And now
It's a learning process.
it's a learning process. And then when I started cooking food, I'm like, well, look what I can make. Like, look, let's try this. And as she started tasting it, she's like, okay, this is actually really good. Like, you don't, it's not just, you know, hamburgers and steak and all of these things. There's a lot of different things you can do with it. And community and support of significant others, friends, whatever it is essential. But it also, to get there, you have to communicate, like very direct about, in a nice, sweet manner, about what it is.
That's right. In a nice, sweet manner.
In a nice, sweet manner.
You'll get a lot more buy-in.
Yes. Yes, in a nice, sweet manner.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I agree. And I think it's sort of like, you know, if you have someone who is absolutely not on board, some of the things you can take, if you're someone trying to make those changes, it's just what you said, you can offer to do some of the cooking and just like exactly what you said, slowly, sweetly educating the other people in your household. I actually get this a lot with parents and kids, you know? And so it's like, you know, I do see a lot of teenagers in my therapy practice. And so, you know, I'm pretty privy that our kiddos are not eating in healthy ways. It's very convenient, and so of course for me, I'm like, oh, I just think that's connecting to all the mental health issues. So when I do have a client, talking to them as well about that importance of modeling for your children. And I guess I'm just saying this because sometimes you can get that spouse or significant other to buy in for the kids. And, you know, versus maybe specifically for their spouse, but if they have kids, you can sort of use that a little bit, I guess, to help motivate that person, that spouse who's maybe not as supportive at first, educating them on that importance of feeding their kiddos better too can sometimes help.
Yeah, you know, once I started down this road to reverse pre-diabetes and started on the ketogenic diet, it made me a lot more aware. Number one of what, I mean, all of a sudden you look at, you know, I looked at my eating pattern over the last 6 decades.
Right.
And realized that, you know, the amount of carbs that I was eating every day and where it put my body. And over the last 2 years, your sugar platform recovers really fast. The A1C and fasting glucose only took me 52 days, right?
Yeah.
But there are other things. I mean, because the damage is global, right? It's pancreas, kidneys, liver, brain, all of those organs, skin.
Yep.
And what I didn't realize when I started, because I was, super focused on the glucose.
Right. I believe that about you. Yes. What are
I'm
my numbers?
like, it's going down.
Yeah. Right.
One way or the other.
Right.
And, but it's taken 2 years for some of these other things to clear in me. Like I was a gout sufferer going into this too.
Yep.
And I've learned since then that I'm hyperuricemic, of which there's something like 74 million people in the US that are walking around with high uric acid, and they don't really know it because, and I don't want to sidetrack the conversation, but they don't really know it because doctors, we don't even measure it as kids or anything. They wait until you got gout.
That's exactly, till you're in pain,
and then they measure it. I thought I broke my toe.
Right.
And then, they measure it then and like, well, your uric acid's high, you have gout. And it's like, okay, in any case, I guess what I'm trying to say is that when you start down this road of trying to get to better health and the approach that you use for that, obviously it's all individualized to people. I think in the area that we're in, because we're more specific to this thing. I mean, the bottom line is we have to bring the carbs down, but it takes time. And I know I've come to the conclusion that the psychosocial issues, though, this is really the biggest impediment to sustaining the lifestyle. And I know that the things that you two have both gone back and forth with have been the biggest challenges for me. I mean, I go to a social gathering now with the same group of people, and I still get put under pressure.
Right.
Don't you want to have some of this?
Exactly.
The last time around it was freshly baked bread.
Yeah.
Well, of course I would like to have some. It smells great.
Right.
And back in the day when I was still eating lots of carbs, I would make these massive soups. T can attest to this. And I would literally eat a half a loaf of freshly baked French.
We both did that. Garlic bread.
You know what I remember like on climbing trips, like it was always huge vats of beans and things like that you were cooking up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and you probably will also remember the amount of food that I used to have in my pack when I would get up to the crag. And when you're having conversations with people about diabetes, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I'm not diabetic. I go hypo. That's a quote. I go hypo.
Wow.
And I'm going, dude, that's the point.
Exactly.
Your sugar is going boom, boom, boom like that. And you're like me, I'll bet. And my next question is, how much do you worry about eating during the day? Yeah. Oh, I got to eat all the time,
and you don't, but yes, right. But that's how people feel.
Exactly. I know.
Yeah, because, well, as you know, just to reiterate, but yeah, as that blood sugar is dropping, it's like you need to eat more in order to feel okay. And I get that a little, I don't want to go off topic. I think this is moving in the right direction, but, I get that a lot with people, who have mood stuff, lots of mood swings.
Yeah.
Like if I can just get their blood sugar steady, those mood issues resolve completely,
Hangry. I think people say hangry all the time.
Right.
I feel like I used to use it all the time, and I realized no, it's
exactly
not hangry.
Well, to that point, T, here's what's also interesting. I used to do that and feel that same way. And I'm not, if you've listened to my stuff, I am not, we have some different clientele. I am not totally keto. I have been in the past. I'll utilize it sometimes, but I am much more, I just know the individual stuff. So I do a little bit better with some more carbs. But with that said, my carbs are still always almost under 100, which for me, like in the keto community, that's kind of higher. But in general, that is still very low carb compared to what the general population is doing. Okay, now I just lost track of what we were talking about.
No, you're okay. I'll bring you back, and then maybe T has something to throw in with this. So you've mentioned a few times now that you try to get your clients to think differently. And we're focused right now on the fact that, okay, I see the social thing is being layered, right? Like an onion. So at the most narrow part of it, you've got the person you're trying to help and their significant other or spouse. And then you've got the group of friends. And then you've got the bigger picture. Like when I would go to work, right? The break room. Oh my God.
I did a whole podcast on that. Yeah. I did a whole episode on that. The break room at work. Yep.
So when you talk about getting someone to think differently, we're talking about the people that are not like us, right? In this room right now, where we can pretty much say no.
Right.
How do you go about what is the strategy for them, the people that are listening to this that are struggling with this right now, and both the health coaches and the people that are actively trying to say no? How do you get them to think differently? Like how do you open the door to that?
Right. So first of all, teaching awareness there. So you really have to educate someone on how their thoughts create the feelings that lead to the behavior, right? So it's that whole that cycle, because honestly, we are not taught this. I mean, our kids are not taught this. We are not taught this. So, I mean, I find for most of my clients, they don't even know that think, feel, behave cycle, right? So giving them some education on that and how hopping into that thought line, when we start to do some strategies and skills around that thought line, how that can influence the behavior and make it so much easier than like white knuckling for changes. You know, it really does give them a sense, oh, I maybe have a little control here. So offering that to your clients, educating them on that, or if you're a person trying to change, understanding that think, feel, do cycle. And then beyond that, you know, some of the strategies that I would first start off with clients who are trying to build on that thought work cycle is, well, first of all, some journaling, which can really be helpful, but giving them some journal prompts in regards to just becoming more aware of their thoughts. I mean, so many of us go through this life and we really behave and react based on our emotions, on how we're feeling. So if I'm feeling, you know, super sad about something, if we want to stay in the food realm, you know, I'm maybe going to eat to try to numb from that a little bit, or I'm maybe going to eat to try to find a little bit of joy. But this can be anything. We're feeling angry, so we flip someone off while we're driving around. I mean, we react a lot from our feelings. So really learning, and not just learning, then practicing being aware. What am I thinking right now? I mean, we have something like, I think it's like 80,000 thoughts a day. I mean, think of how many you're actually conscious of. Most of us, none. We're just behaving, you know?
And I think too, like us as society, we've been taught not to, like, I think in general, we've been taught not to process those feelings, right? So like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm 25. I was like, wait, how old? I'm 25.
Too, but I'm not 25.
Well, like, you know, with me and my friends, like when I was in high school, it was like, you're sad about something, let's get a tub of ice cream, eat and cry. You know
right? I mean? Yes.
Like, and now it's, you're sad about something, let's get a bottle of wine and drink and cry.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Yep. And so it's like I think that as a society, we've been taught to start using, whether it's substances or food or whatever it is, we've been trained to be like, okay, so whenever you're upset about something, let's go grab the highest, the jug of ice cream. Let's go eat a pint of ice cream. And that's so loaded in carbohydrates, you know?
Right. And it totally works in the moment. It works. That's what's so hard.
And actually, I really like that you said the think, feel, behave process, because that's actually something I started with my therapist in March. And that's actually something that she really works with me on, is like, okay, you think, when you go through the process of like, what you think is like, and like you probably heard of like the doing mind and the being mind.
Absolutely. That's all. Yes.
So it's just kind of getting out of like I'm going to use the doing mind. And for those who don't know what the doing mind is, essentially, the doing mind is when we have to, like when we think about something and maybe become like obsessive about it. It's kind of like, I need to do this. Whereas like I think it's called the being mind is a little bit more, okay, I'm breathing into, I'm actually like how I'm feeling. And then that it kind of, you want the being mind to kind of take over the doing mind, because actually the doing mind is your constant thinking. It's like you're constantly
It
Like,
takes a ton of energy, makes us feel exhausted. Yeah.
and that's what I think causes people to, overeat, or
You bet.
they can't do something, is because of that doing mind that's kind of there telling you, no, you can't do this.
Right.
You're not gonna be able to achieve these goals. Like, you're not supposed to feel, you know what I mean? You're not supposed to think this way,
Yeah. Well, I think you bring up a really good point about we're not taught how to process, or I use the word a lot, diffuse a feeling. So if you think of our thoughts create these feelings, and we're experiencing all these feelings, good, bad, whatever, they are all these sensations that move through our body. They take energy, all those things, and often we will be reactionary to them. But if we learn how, and there are ways, there are skills, there are strategies. This is what I've been doing forever. There's ways to teach a person to move, how to diffuse a feeling. How do you process it without numbing from it, without checking out from it, without trying to create this dopamine hit with some chocolate or alcohol or cake at night? How do you really sit in it? And that's the being part, right?
Yep.
So when we can sit in a feeling and use some of these skills to process the feeling, to diffuse the feeling, you will find like that feeling, usually I think 90 seconds is, the typical for how long that feeling will last. But you can help your clients start to understand you can learn to sit in a feeling, and it does pass. Now it may come back again, but it's like you can sit there, and there's different things. You can breathe through it. I teach lots of different breathing protocols to help bring that anxiousness down while you're trying to really feel. I do have, it's one of my first episodes on my podcast that teaches how to sit in a feeling, how to diffuse it, so that you're not trying to shift it, change it, numb from it, all the things.
Yeah, and I think that that's super important, because that's something I know that I'm working on, and it's a big part of our company, right? You have to train people to, instead of give in to those thoughts and those feelings, to breathe into learning how to navigate something different.
Exactly.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Creating that space.
I think that we have a leadership role, and just yesterday, I know for me, I've already mentioned that I have my relationship with alcohol. I haven't really sorted out. But one thing I have sorted out about it is now I have the awareness to know, when I want to have a beer, and I know why I want it, because I was using that to unwind from the day. I was using it to get to a relaxation state.
For most of us, yes, typical.
Yeah, and yesterday was one of those days, right? Because we're hammering away, we're trying to build this company, and and help people, and I was just beating my head on the wall all day yesterday. And then I mentioned that I had this guy for the first time last night to train, and he'd canceled the day before at the last minute, and I'm making dinner early for my own family, right? Everything's in the oven. I've got everything out there. I'm still putting stuff out 10 minutes before he should be there.
Right.
And I'm wondering, is this guy going to show up or not? Right.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I was like, I had that craving. I'm like,
yeah,
it would be nice to have a beer right now.
I just want some relief. I've been going all day. My brain's been thinking all day. Give me some relief.
But I didn't.
Really? Yeah. So how was that? Did you have to sit with that urge then, or like how'd you get through it?
Well, I've been following a lot of the stuff that you're talking about here, and I hope our listeners are taking notes. Is that I have the awareness now. I understand why I do it.
Right.
And so now when the urge comes on, I'm like, all right, look, and what I'm trying to do is I haven't eliminated beer, but I'm trying to like only have one or two, a couple of days out of the week.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm not drinking every day anymore. And for me, the alcohol really there are two issues with it metabolically, right? One of which is the alcohol.
You bet.
Itself, right? And how that is interacting with your metabolics, it's not really, outside of the fat part of it,
right?
It's not really well understood yet, right?
Right, true, yeah.
But the other part of it, for me, back in the old days, was the amount of carbs I was bringing in before I even had my high carb meal. I mean, that was close to 70 or 75 grams of carbs before I even start working on my plate. But anyway, Yeah, I think both T and I, we're trying to practice what we preach.
Yeah.
With it. Listen, we've been going now for almost an hour.
Okay.
And to be respectful of everyone's time,
Mm-hmm.
Heather, how would you, and T, if you got another question for her, as soon as I stop talking, just jump in with that.
Okay.
And then maybe we can have Heather summarize what you think the top psychosocial strategies are for our clients and for the patients that are out there to help their situation.
Okay. T, did you have a question or no?
I think that's I think that answer will help kind of bring this whole conversation to a close.
Perfect.
Thanks, really important.
Yeah. So what I would say to that is what we've kind of spoke about the last couple minutes here. So awareness and understanding in my world is the first part of any change. So awareness, understanding, and we do that as coaches or as therapists, you know, through educating our clients, through assessment of where they're at, and then teaching some of these skills and strategies to help them become more aware and to start to understand. Here's, I won't go off too long here, but just, you know, I just recorded an episode on, you know, is your overeating, binging behavior stemming from psychological issues or just a habit, right? And so it's helping clients navigate through that a little bit. You may end up with a client who has some pretty major trauma background. And so seeing a professional therapist who works in that regard to help them process that trauma, you know, I would say is beyond what a coach would do, right? I mean, we're talking about things beyond food, whatever. So just that would be one thing, but you get to sort of you get to help understand where your client's at and make some of those referrals if needed. With that said, if you listen to that episode, I go into, I think at some point, most of our overeating, binge eating is simply a habit. So then that's where, as coaches, we can really plug in and help with habit change strategies, help with all those sorts of things. So awareness, understanding would probably be the biggest issue. And then this is one other one. There's lots, but there's one other I just want to offer that I have found super useful for myself and for coaching clients and helping people move through. It's giving them that understanding. They need some understanding, some awareness of their thoughts, teaching them some of that stuff. And then beyond that, and this goes back into some brain science stuff on how we change behaviors and that sort of thing, but helping them understand that you need awareness or attention as well as frustration to make any changes in the brain. So if we're trying to change a behavioral habit, right, or a thinking habit that is creating some of the behaviors that we're trying to shift, it's understanding you need that attention, that awareness, but you also need to feel the frustration. So, you know, when you're trying to change something and you get to that level of, I just can't do this. I am so sick of this. I'm just frustrated. It's not working. Teaching the client that if they can maintain some sort of that behavior through the frustration, it gets easier. And that truly is based in, you know, brain science and what we know. You actually need that frustration feeling to come through in order to make the changes in the brain, to make the new habit easier. So sometimes just letting your clients know that's what's going on can help them stay in frustration a little longer. That sort of makes that click, right? And that makes the new behavior easier.
Well, that's some really good feedback. I love like how I mean the mind affects your whole entire body. Like I'm very into mindfulness.
Yeah.
You know, when I started, and this is, I just want to point this out to whoever's watching this and clients. We have two really good assets, right? You know, here right now. Heather, you're very educated. I mean, you're a therapist, you're a coach, you do all these things, and Dad is also, I mean, a teacher and a coach. Like we have really, really good assets right here. And I think that sometimes the hardest part for someone is not being able to, you know, go over that, like, I don't know, like go over the mountain. They can't make that first step. Yeah, they don't reach out for help. So I will say that, you know, for whoever is watching, you have two really incredible people here right now who can help get to that point, you know, and you have to with guidance. That's why we need to standardize, you know, the feeling, like your feelings and therapy and everything like that, because you can't just, if you want to make a big change in your life, you need to have support, you need to have guidance, and you need to have people, you know, show you how to do it and help you along the way.
Gosh, T, I totally agree. And just quick to piggyback on that, even as a therapist, like of 20 years, you know, and all that kind of stuff, I still off and on go to therapy. Like I have my own therapist. I have my own coach, you know, because as human beings, even as helpers, we're really good at helping other people. But even when it comes to ourselves, we even need that as coaches and therapists. So couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I really do. So thank you for joining, and I love what you had to say and everything. That was awesome.
This was awesome. Good to see you both.
I have one last thing. So I'm going to throw this out for you, Heather, because maybe it would be a pod. I mean, we can't do it now because it would probably be at least another hour of discussion. But
no doubt.
but maybe you want to think about a podcast in the future, or we could do this again. So my question is, so from a naive point of view, right? Because I don't have any training in the area of the psychology or the counseling like you do, right? That's not my training. But I've been trying to think, all right, how does somebody end up with an eating disorder? How does that happen, right? And I've been thinking of my own process in life, how I ended up, you know, drinking regularly every single night. How did I end up doing that? Right. And then trying to couch this with my own idea that we've got food cravings on one end and eating disorders on the other. And I'm going, what is my model? How does somebody end up with this? Because I don't think it's as simple as somebody going, well, this kid or this person, you know, had this traumatic event sometime in their childhood, and this is why this has driven them to eat like crazy.
Right.
So to me, okay, this is my theory, and I would like to hear your feedback down the road. Like, even if you think I'm full of it.
Okay. Yeah, I tell you.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm thinking, all right. And I mainly think about my own dysfunctional family in this, right? Every night there was this rage going on between my parents, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, here I am as a child in that environment.
Yeah.
And then after the trauma is over, or maybe even during, you're trying to sort out ways to be comfortable.
You bet.
So you seek this environment. You seek an environment. It's not one thing you're seeking, right? You're seeking an environment that's peaceful.
Safety too. Yep.
Safety. And part of that environment is the safety aspect. What aspect is the safety? And then what habits did I develop to make myself feel comfortable and safe? And then you become an adult, right? And the eating is probably, if I had an eating disorder, I mean, I'm not a binger. That's the thing I have experience with now in my coaching, though.
You bet.
And maybe the binging is just one part of that. So in order to recover, I'm wondering if that one has to dismantle all of the things that are contributing to that environment somehow. I don't know. I don't expect you to respond right now because this is an open-ended question.
Right. It would be super interesting though to go into.
Right.
You know, yeah, because, you know, I will just say too, that speaks to a little bit about that episode I just recorded. So it'll be released on Sunday. So could take a listen to that too. But, you know, just real quick, some of the ideas there. If you are a child in this, what I would consider, you know, as you explained, traumatic sort of environment, right? As a child, you know, we don't have any of our real forebrain working for us yet. So it's a lot of impulsive. And so what happens in those moments when there's fighting going on or, you know, whatever it is, your fight or flight response is going off. And so you get hooked in that fight or flight. So the idea is, you know, what can I do? What am I doing to bring that down? And so it may be like, later on that night, we sit down and have dinner together and everybody's really peaceful. So food becomes sort of this anchor for safety. And it could be anything. It could be, it could be completely disengaging from, it could be going and sitting in your room for like disengaging socially from people. You know, it could be so many things, but it can be food. And often it is food or drink because food or drink is that immediate
It's
safety.
immediate.
When we eat, we are immediately flipped into rest and digest. We're immediately flipped into our parasympathetic state. Whereas when we're in fight or flight, we're in sympathetic. So ingesting food brings us right down, creates that feeling of safety for our brain. So anyway, that's kind of how we get hooked.
And my disengagement was going to the Wind River Mountains every single summer and extracting myself out of that environment for 3-4 months at a time.
Exactly. You know, so we figure out ways to create, our brain figures out ways to create that safety model for us, you know. Real quick, sorry. One other thing, as we become adults though, we then can carry what I would consider that's like a habit then of safety, right? And so as adults, it's like we now have this part of our brain that we can think through, understand, and become aware. And sometimes just that awareness, understanding doesn't mean we have to go in and process all these childhood traumas. I mean, it could, but it doesn't mean that. You can at some point as an adult be like, well, yeah, that's what happened to me. Now I have this habit. And so now how do I use some habit change strategies to move that along, change it? Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
T, do you have anything okay, so Heather, thank you so much for today. I hope that our listeners had their notebook out and they took some notes and that they've learned something from this. And wow, that's all I can say. Thank you so much. This is awesome.
It's great to be here. Thanks for asking me. I really appreciate it.
And yeah, and I guess we should close. And I will send you the link to this once I get it uploaded to YouTube, and you can do whatever you want with it, obviously. And then if you want the MP4 eventually, I can get that to you. It's going to be a big file. We'll have to sort that out. But
okay, nope, I appreciate it. All sounds good.
All right. Well, everyone have a great day, and we'll see you on the flip flop.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.